7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
On behalf of IDFC First Bank and the Economic Times, welcome to Ask the Expert, the show where you get to ask all your startup questions to India's best startup entrepreneurs. It's an AMA session, which is Ask Me Anything. Actually, Ask Mayank Anything. That's what AMA stands for in this case. Today's expert is Mayank Kumar. He's the co-founder and MD of the EdTech unicorn Upgrad. Now, like most startups, Upgrad's road to becoming a unicorn was not without its challenges. One of those challenges is what's being called the funding winter that's currently underway. So obviously, runways have shortened, money is tight. It's not easy to sustain a business in this environment. If you have any questions about starting a business, scaling a business, sustaining a business, or even when to quit a business, you can ask your questions in the chat box. I'll pose your questions to Mayank. Mayank, while we wait for live questions to come in, some questions have already come in from pre-registered participants. So I'm going to start off with some questions. Now, you've said in a previous interview that constant upskilling can be the UPI moment for India Inc. Now, I don't see the correlation between upskilling and UPI. Can you explain what you mean?
First of all, thank you, Suresh, for having me here. I guess when I said that how it could be, constant upskilling could be a UPI moment is largely because I guess skilling and learning has always been associated with a moment of time in your life and career, which is you have to do skilling when you are 18, 24, and after that,
college, typically,
study in college, and after that, you are just on your own and you sort of learn on the job. But I guess in today's context, what's happening is people are learning on an ongoing basis. Each of these learning module is adding onto your profile over a period of time. So today, when I meet somebody, I don't ask them, where did you do your undergrad from? I ask them in the last 4 years, 5 years, where all have you upskilled and what all have you upskilled on? I guess the more you get into these kind of conversation, these kind of questions, the reason I'm coining it together as UPI is because all the learning is getting captured in various forms and formats, whether through digital platforms or through physical or offline sort of institution. With Academic Bank of Credit that government has launched recently, where all the learnings can be banked at a certain place, an individual can dip into, an employer can dip into figuring out how skilled or upskilled an individual is. So I guess the fact that you have to constantly upskill and it's no longer a moment of time initiative or an event in somebody's life, but a constant sort of engagement. The fact that each of these skilling and upskilling is getting recorded, the fact that employer will now have visibility of what you have learned, I do believe that it's similar to what a UPI moment is, because everything coming together where learning is no longer an event, but a continuous process.
Okay, and you can also buy it and invest in granular methods, I guess, not like a 5-year college degree kind of system. Okay, that brings me to the obvious next question. Can you identify the top 3 skills that young professionals or young startup founders should invest in?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I guess a lot of time people ask this question as to what are the skills that people should invest in. I think the first one for me very clearly is resilience. And I do mention this, Suresh, in various conversations, that it's very difficult to beat a person that shows up every day.
Okay.
You can beat somebody who's highly skilled, but it's very difficult to beat a person who definitely shows up every day. So having the resilience and the perseverance of coming back at it, because as a founder, I guess you will have more bad days and good days, and you need to be resilient to come back again and again on the bad days and not get bogged down by not get bogged down by 1 or 2 sort of setbacks and failure. So that's definitely number 1 in my list. The second one for me has to be the fact that as a founder, while you need to learn something new regularly, but you need to always leave your past behind on an ongoing basis. So I guess you have to always constantly reinvent and innovate on an ongoing basis. So sometimes this context of unlearning, which is not sort of spoken a lot about, does end up becoming a lot more critical for a founder than just learning. You need to have the skill of learning and picking up new things.
You're saying you need to learn how to unlearn. That's a skill that you need to learn. Okay.
You cannot be emotional about a certain decision. You can be passionate, but just cannot be emotional about taking a decision because just the fact that you did it in the past. And that's, again, a very sort of critical skill that at least we have seen. At least I have seen founders having, having the issues of sort of coping up on an ongoing basis. And I guess the third thing for me, again, something that I've sort of looked at and picked it up while sort of going through the journey is that very counterintuitive, Suresh, but you do need to put yourself sometimes in uncomfortable situations.
Okay.
And when I say this, the general tendency when you're working in a regular job, or I mean, if you are doing something which is regular, plain instead, is that you want to get into comfortable situation, comfortable position. But as a founder, the more you put yourself in uncomfortable position, sometimes great innovative ideas and innovative thought comes out. Put yourself in situations which are not your usual self, and I think you will see a lot of interesting things coming out of that particular aspect. So I think those couple of learnings definitely has helped me, and a skill I believe that I guess all entrepreneurs should have and pick up as they go along building their own startup.
Excellent. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Mayank, I'm a professional anchor and I'm a journalist. Is AI going to take my job away?
I think, look, I mean, AI will definitely have an impact on all jobs. There will be an impact on your job. There will be an impact on my job. But look, I think the same question got asked when the first time washing machine came into existence, when the
Or
first
television? Yeah.
television came into existence. So actors said that, look, I don't have a job left for me any longer. But you know how it is, right? I mean, evolution of human beings, we are always innovative and figuring out what more to be done. I believe the order of skills and order of working engagement will go higher. I think you, as a journalist, as an anchor, you need to understand how AI can be leveraged to make your job better versus worrying that AI will take away the job. So I guess my feedback to you is that upskill yourself on AI and pick up new skills as you go along. It may not be technical skills, but it definitely will be tools that are needed to become more and more powerful. I just want to give one small example. I think. I mean, I like reading about history. So one of the things I've read at most places that every time a new technology innovation comes in, people worry about their jobs the most. When
Correct.
calculus came, we said math will disappear. When industrial revolution happened, people said all the jobs will get disappear because any
Machine.
math will turn into this. I do believe that at AI ecosystem, because now it has moved from physical replacement to mental replacement, the implication we have never seen in the past. But as I said, I think most of the places we have to start understanding how to use AI to make our jobs more efficient and even better as we go along.
There's one of the informal laws of technology that says any technology is overestimated in the short run and underestimated in the long run. So we might be at the point in time where overestimating AI in the short run and underestimating its long run impact on jobs and careers. Now,
because I guess because we're talking to founders, and that's an important part. Any founder and any investor, if you actually ask me, always overestimate the short term.
correct.
And as an investor, you underestimate the long term. So you have to just be at it. Do not get bothered about what the short term things are saying, but just keep the long term in mind as you're building your own venture.
Okay. Another question about upskilling. Now, given the current state of startups, we spoke about funding winter, which obviously means that pay scales are either frozen or pink slips are being offered. It's not the best time to be a professional working in a company. Now, these professionals may not be willing to invest in upskilling themselves. They may not have the financial security in upskilling. Any advice from an Upgrad perspective?
Very, very counter to that point. So actually what happens historically, if you look at the data and the trend, when the economy is highest, education is at its lowest.
Oh, okay. Inverse. Okay.
It's a complete inverse correlation. When the economy is doing really well, people tend to go back into the job force without being skilled enough, because there's enough demand for people to be sucked into the job ecosystem because the economy is really well. And therefore, usually the demand for skilling and upskilling goes down. When the economy starts going down, I'm not saying going down, but let's say there's a context of funding winter that you spoke about, or even in
economy dips a little bit, not going down, a temporary dip.
There's a temporary dip. So I think that's the time when people go back and invest in themselves for 2-3 reasons. One, I guess everybody wants to stay differentiated in the market, and they do need to differentiate themselves from who you are versus the crowd. Second, many a times you do have time in your hand because, I guess the day-to-day activity may not be as strenuous as what it was earlier. And I guess all these reasons allow one to sort of overinvest. historically, the over global MBA enrollment, because MBA is something where working class typically comes up across various places. The MBA enrollment in 2001, when the dot-com crisis happened, shot up significantly. 2009-10, when the GFC happened, it shot up again significantly. 2015-16, when there was one more sort of round of so-called quote-unquote funding in winter, the MBA enrollment shot up significantly. So it's an inverse correlation. It's time for everybody to invest in themselves and differentiate, because as the moment the economy opens up, you do need to stand out of the crowd.
Okay, that's good advice. For seasoned professionals who are trying to quickly switch careers, sometimes you need to switch careers itself, not just a job. Any advice for people in their 30s, 40s looking to switch, contemplating a career shift perhaps?
I guess today, in today's context, right, Suresh, my take was that, look, I don't know about others, but my parents had one job in their entire career.
Yeah, many of our parents are similar in that sense.
They just spent 35, 40 years doing one job throughout the entire career span, right? I mean, in today's context, an individual, as I said, speaking to you earlier also, that an individual goes through maybe 4, 5, 6 career shifts in their entire career span or the life workspace span.
And that's important, not just a job shift, but career shifts, right? These might be entirely different careers that you pursue.
You may be doing investment banking, but you now move into, let's say, data science or AI or something else, or you may be doing sales, you're moving to marketing, and from marketing, you're moving to, finance and corporate finance, etc. So those shifts are very common. And at each point of time, when the shift happens, you do need to invest in yourself. Unfortunately, one of the challenges with the way our society has evolved, and specifically, let's say, in India, we have assumed that our entire education has to be funded by our parents, because that's what parents are here for, to fund your education. And the moment you get into a job, the entire upskilling and work-related learning has to be funded by the company. As individuals, we are not very used to investing in themselves. If we ask the audience also, look, how much do you invest in your child's education?
Yeah.
And compare that to how much you invest in your own education, the answer is going to be very sort of startling for a lot of people out there. So I think for a lot of professionals, 100% look at and contemplate career shifts. I've seen great sort of professionals, because of the career shift, to the point that I raised earlier, that you need to put yourself in an uncomfortable position. I've seen their career taking an exponential jump and not an incremental jump. B, as you're looking at making the career shift, please invest in yourself. Do not assume that career shifts will happen only because you're so good in what you're doing. You do need to invest in yourself and make that sort of shift happen. I have just 2 data points to share with you, Suresh, which I just wanted to sort of give you an input. Not because I come from upskilling ecosystem, but we surveyed about 3,500 professionals, white-collar professionals. And we asked them the question, did you skill up? Did you not skill up in the last 3-5 years, etc.? One interesting that we found, that people who skill have got about 2.5 times higher increment than not skilled. So there's a value to it. I mean, it's not just that I'm saying it's because of that, but people find value to what you're doing. And the second thing that I've realized, that people who shift careers, and this was a question that we asked these 3,500 professionals. Hey, you shifted career. How long did it take for you to stay in that career? You pivoted back or reverted to your older career. And again, the data that we saw was the people who have invested in themselves tend to pivoted career for far longer than people who have not invested, because they haven't gone through the grill and rigor of doing it. So do invest and do ensure that you are staying ahead of the curve as you go along.
Okay. Mayank, one of our viewers, Asim Kapoor, says, and I think Asim would like to enter the market for a new supplement. I imagine a protein supplement. I know you're not in the food or health food business. He says entering the market for a new supplement brand can be a challenging endeavor, especially in an industry with intense competition. There are many different protein supplements in the market and shrinking profit margins. So he asks, to succeed in such a market, i.e. intense competition, shrinking profit margins, how should he craft his value prop?
I guess just very important, there are 3 questions that you always need to ask as you're starting your venture. And I guess if I don't understand the supplement business very well. So I'm assuming that when you're talking like this, you mean that there's limited differentiation because
because one protein powder, another protein powder, roughly the same constituents, I think, go into the protein powder, roughly.
if there is lack of differentiation, please remember that industry is bound to become a commoditized industry. And as you get into commoditized industry, making the profit margins are very difficult. So the three questions that people always need to ask, and the second one is the most critical one. The first one, is there a need? And I guess there is a need for protein supplements, and therefore it exists out there in the market. Can you monetize itself? Again, I think the answer is yes. People are paying for protein supplements, and therefore you can monetize it. There's a need for bubble wrap, Suresh, but you cannot monetize it.
Correct.
For the third question, is what is it that you do that others will find it difficult to replicate?
Yeah.
Quote, it's called differentiation. It's not positioning, it's differentiation. So there has to be an insight to our listener that, look, you do need to see this in a light that there has to be a unique value proposition that you're bringing to the table. Whether it is just the protein supplement, but with 6 months of counseling services along with that, or the protein supplement has got certain ingredient which otherwise are not found in other places because it's difficult for them to sort of copy and replicate. I think you guys have to go back to that one single truth that you believe in, that others don't believe in, and work hard on the differentiation. I guess a lot of time as founders, we spend a disproportionate time in understanding how do I position my product. I think we should spend disproportionate time in understanding how do I differentiate my product. And the only thing we have to ask is, what is it that I do differently that others will find it difficult to replicate? And that's a question that I guess I will sort of give as a feedback, that figure out what do you do differently, where do you spend the most amount of time and energy into, that other competitors of yours will find it very difficult to sort of replicate. I can go deeper into this, but as we go along in the question, I will maybe...
We can come back to this later. Okay, next question from Mohit Jaiswal. Fairly simple question, Mayank. Mohit is contemplating starting an IT services company. He says, like Mindtree and TCS, everyone else is working on innovative products and not services. Do you think there's any room left to start an IT services company?
Look, I think, again, as a founder and closer in your own circle of competence, you're far better in answering that question. But here's my take on IT services. I think, look, IT services, there are much larger players that exist out there. And therefore, creating a positioning and a differentiation for yourself is going to be extremely, extremely critical as you're entering into that space. Whether you take up the AI bandwagon and ensure that the AI bandwagon is something that you are able to provide a strong services into. The reason why a lot of these IT services companies are going into product side is largely because their business model are very simple, right? I mean, there's an individual and you have to charge that individual to the customer. So if you're charging $50,000, $60,000 per individual to a client, how do you move it from 50, 60,000 to a 75, 125, $150,000 per individual per year? And in that movement, a lot of people are moving towards product. So if you ask me today, the white space that exists is that there are no strong products coming out of India. So between services and products, my obvious choice will be on product. Again, my objective is not to give you what you need to do right. But I guess my objective is to give you the question that what value prop or what insight are you entering into that business that an Infosys will find it very difficult to replicate, or that a TCS will find it very difficult to replicate, or a Wipro will find it very difficult to replicate. So I think that's the fundamental question that you need to ask. I don't think you should be doing it because the competitor is doing something else. You should be doing it because you have an insight which is better than what others are bringing to the table.
Okay. Next question comes from a solopreneur, Mayank. Her name is Priyanka Bulia, and she's a health and wellness coach. I imagine she's a solo individual health and wellness coach. And she asks, how does she scale up her business? Any suggestions for a solopreneur?
No, I think, having sometimes having a solopreneur is a blessing in disguise because then you have to just take a decision yourself and not have multiple founders to sort of come to a conclusion with. But as you are sort of building your business out, look, the business that you're doing, the demand for that business is sort of scaling up very rapidly.
Yeah.
Having said that, it's not something that people spend on their own on. And therefore, the challenge that you will face in scaling up is just the acceptability of the fact that you need to invest in your own wellness as sort of you are going through your own sort of life journey. And spending and investing on that particular front is going to be critical. But my advice to you is going to be forget about anything else. Get your first 100 customer to really, really love you, not just like you, not just appreciate you, but they should love you, because in the business that you are in, word of mouth matters a lot. And for the word of mouth context, given that you're providing coaching, it is super critical that that coaching goes hand in hand with the right word of mouth, because the next set of customer rely on your own existing customers to bring the next set of customers for you, rather than trying to go after marketing and performance marketing to scale up. So depending on your scale, I guess invest heavily on the customers first, and then look at scaling up, given the fact that you are a solo entrepreneur at this point of time.
Then let me ask you a personal question, Mayank. Now you have a brand, Upgrad, but you also are a personal brand as Mayank Kumar, co-founder of Upgrad, right? We've seen many startup founders become personal brands in their own right. Some of them are on TV game shows, some of them are on Instagram. How do you view personal brand building for yourself? Do you invest any time in personal brand building for Mayank Kumar, not for Upgrad?
No, not exactly, Suresh. So not. I think I personally don't believe I'm a brand. So I think that question may not be relevant for me. But see, I guess whatever you are today and whatever I am today, a large portion is because of what I'm doing at Upgrad, and therefore, more than a founder creating their own personal brand, it's not a. It's. I mean, I don't think it's a founder works hard to build their own brand. Some of the founders, given the sector and the industry they are in, they are bound to be a lot more out there.
Yeah.
If you
see businesses, especially, you're bound to be a lot more out there.
when you are more out there, and that you are out there not because you want to build your own brand, because you want to give credibility to what you are building as an organization, as a brand. And given education is one such industry wherein credibility matters. I mean, you go to a large institution because of the professor, because of faculty member that are there, and therefore lending your own name just to whether you want to be vulnerable in front of the customer, say that, look, I'm there, I'm in front of you, and I'm not going anywhere. It just helps you in building your own business brand more than anything else. So to your specific question, Suresh, no, I don't invest in anything on building my own brand. I guess it's what I get paid for, is to sort of work and be out there, such that when people are trusting Upgrad with certain of their own sort of capital and investment and money to be spent on their own skilling, they believe that there is a human being on the other side who's going to sort of be there and look after them.
Okay. Also, maybe your personal vanity level is low. It's not as high as some other startup founders. Okay. Another personal question for you from Inosh Paul. Inosh asks, how do you handle disagreements or conflicts with your co-founders? And Mike, you can't say you don't have any disagreements or conflicts with your co-founders. You have to talk about.
Maybe I should ask you that question so that I can get some tip in sort of picking this up. No, look, as you are, I have a very clear formula for this. When you're building something out with a co-founder, you need to be aligned on the long-term vision very clearly. There are two things that you need to be aligned on: long-term vision and the value system. I think these two things are extremely, extremely critical. Disagreement in long-term vision, that you want to put AI in everything while the other co-founder wants to do more sort of operating stuff. It creates friction, and the value system has to be very aligned. I think these two things are extremely critical when you are sort of building a long-term company. At different points of time, given situations change and things sort of move whether left or right, there could be certain divergence that may come in either on the long-term vision or the value system. By value system, I mean just the way of working things and way of sort of execution, way of getting things out in the market. The moment that happens, you need to introspect and ask that question: that are these irreparable sort of issues on these two axes of value system and I mean, just the value system as well as the long-term vision, or are these something that can be sorted out in conversations? On all other aspects, just to be very clear, there has to be very clear line stating that the 2 co-founders or the 3 co-founders or the 5 co-founders, they are A, B, C, D, E, that each one of them are going to drive. Any decision that falls in the ambit of A, one co-founder has to take lead, and the co-founder's word will always prevail over other.
They have veto power on that domain, so they can.
But amongst the 5 co-founders, you do need to have one amongst the equals, because we are not. It's very difficult to build this in a very democratic way. You can't keep everybody happy in certain decision. One person's decision has to prevail. So I guess where I talked about value system and way of operating, you do need to divide roles and responsibility very clearly, and therefore give veto to the person who's owning one particular role and responsibility. But in case of disagreement, and there could be points of view when people say, no, this is how it has to be done. Identify who's the first amongst equal to build this out.
Even in an actual democracy, I think roughly the same thing works. You can have a lot of voting cross back and forth, and finally it's the first among equals who has to make a decision, he or she. Okay, Abdul Rahman asks a very simple question. Abdul Rahman says, how does one find an angel investor? So how did you find your angel investor, Mayank?
So just maybe I'll come to the angel investor question from Abdul. But so just one more point, that this is very, very critical, because I know that we have just answered the co-founder conflict and moved on.
Go ahead.
But when it comes to co-founder, you have to always revisit every quarter or every monthly that, look, that's a long-term vision that we are working on, and these are our value systems.
Yeah.
These 2 things, the more you emphasize, the more you articulate, the more you speak it out loudly, you will see that the conflicts will not emerge as much. There are certain conflicts that are very easy to resolve. And once you sort of know that these 2 things are not getting compromised, everything under the sun can be easily sorted out and solved. And therefore, having that conversation on these 2 aspects is on a regular basis very, very important as you're working something together. So to Abdul's question, so this was around
Angel investors, how to find one?
No, look, I did not have. I never had an angel investor. I and my co-founder Ronnie, Falgun, and Ravi, whom we came together earlier, one amongst the 4 co-founders decided to say that, look, I'm going to invest the first set of capital, which Ronnie sort of agreed on doing it. So we never went out and got an angel investor. But again, if your question is specifically how do I find an angel investor, they say friends, family, fools are always the first set of people that you should go to. But Abdul, I think it's important you find the right person in the circle of competence in which you're building your own venture in. Let's say if you're building something in B2C or D2C sort of brand play, find people who are competent in that space, who can add value to what you're doing. If you're building in something in B2B SaaS, find people who are competent from that particular ecosystem. See, I guess money is available at various places and various sort of corners, but it's important that you do look for people who can add value over and above the money that they can provide. So if the hypothetical question was, if I had to find an angel investor in the circle, in the area that I'm building out, I will look for the right set of people and approach them. And I know that approaching them is difficult, and therefore you do have to be good at connecting with them at different forums and different platforms and different events and different sessions. Talk to them, find a connect, and therefore that's how I've seen people sort of raising the first angel check while they're building their own venture.
Okay, let's assume Abdul Rahman is currently pitching to you, Mayank, as the angel investor. Let's assume he's starting something in the education space or the edtech space, and he gets his 90-second pitch with you as an angel investor. What would you want to hear from him?
Team, time, and timing. These 3 things matter to me a lot. That what's the on the idea that you're working, I care about the idea, but I do not care about the idea as much. Because look, ideas will change as you evolve. What matters to me is how good is your team, who are coming together. Because at the end of the day, we are you are backing the jockey and not the horse. So you do need the right team who are working on this. How big is a market problem that you're attacking? Because you may be a great set of founders, but if the market is small, the market is small. A great founder will find it very difficult to fight against a small market. So look for markets which are large enough where you can build large-scale companies. And the third thing is timing. It's not very important, but you do have to evaluate whether this is the right time to enter into the business. I guess today nobody wants to start an edtech company.
Tech is not in favor right now.
The timing is not right for many people out there, but it's a great place to actually build a large business. But look, you also have to look at the right timing when you're entering into that particular space. So between the three T's, I do want to get convinced on these three T's, and that's my sort of usual lens in which I look at very early stage ventures.
Fantastic. So for those of you who missed it, the three T's are team, TAM, which is total addressable market, and timing. Is this the right time to get into this business? Okay, on this note, Chinmay asks, what did your first 60 days at Building Upgrad look like? Were you panicking? Were you calm? Were you overworked?
If the options are only these three, all three of them.
Chilled, planning to buy your private island in Italy?
I think we started the same building is where we started Upgrad. We were on the third floor in one small room. The first 60 days, first 30 days and 60 days. Look, when I came in with a very clear understanding of the sector in which I'm looking at building something out. So at least the sectoral knowledge was with me, and I was very clear that what am I building? I guess the first 30 to 60 days went into three things for me to look at. I think the first one for me was I had a set of co-founders, but what kind of team do we want to build around us? Who are the people? What kind of talent that we need to bring in? So a lot of thought went in if I have to build that, but if I have to solve this particular problem statement. And I guess, Suresh, I raised that point that what is it that you do that others will find it difficult to replicate? And therefore you hire people to do that thing, because that's your core and most important thing. So what kind of team and what kind of org that you want to sort of build in the process, that was very critical for us to sort of understand. The second thing that we did, because we were in the B2C business, was talk to a lot of customers and a lot of competition. While I understood competition, given my sort of sectoral knowledge, I did have to spend a lot of time in talking to the consumers just to know how are they thinking, what are they thinking, why do they want to buy a skilling program, what else can they do to sort of not spend on this versus spending on something else. And the third one for me was very clearly focusing on the customer experience and the product. What are we going to build at that point of time? I think these three things were unknown to me. And that's why spending a fair amount of time on what kind of team that we want to build. How do we understand the consumers better as to what they're looking at? And then working on coming out with what's the product that we can build to help resolve what their problem that they're looking at solving at that point of time.
Okay. Next question comes from Suman Thapa. It's live on our YouTube channel. For those of you who have questions, and please type them out in the chat box on the YouTube channel, and we'll put your questions forth to Mayank. Suman Thapa asks, can you share a significant challenge, an example of a significant challenge or obstacle that you and your co-founders faced together, and how did you overcome it? A real life example that you faced.
I think, Suman, that it's not a significant challenge that I can think of, but every day is a significant challenge. So I think every day something new comes up. But I'll give you some early days, because I guess a lot of us out here are just into the entrepreneurial journey or just about to start the entrepreneurial journey. So I think at the early days, when we were starting off, look, we were starting something in the online education space, and I'm talking about 2015. And 2015 was the time when all online programs were either free or very, very cheap at very low priced. And I came with a very clear school of thought that unless the product is, we are not doing a cost plus pricing, but we are doing a value-based pricing. So if I'm doing
what is cost plus and value-based? Can you explain that for our viewers?
Usually there are three ways in which people price their product. They say, okay, what's the cost of manufacturing and producing and delivering the product? Let's add a profit margin, and that's my pricing that I'll go for. The second is a competitive based pricing, that you can look at the market and say, what's the competition pricing it at? And you look at discount or a premium over or below that right now. And the third one is a value based pricing, because you're providing a value and therefore you can price it at a certain level. And therefore, I was very clear that if you have to be in education, you have to be the value-based pricing. Harvard charges whatever that they charge only because that they can deliver on value that they're bringing to the table. But
Correct.
the cost pricing of Harvard may be one third of what they're currently charging.
Mhm.
So we wanted to be a value-based pricing approach. And at the early days, Suresh, we took a lot of counterintuitive call. Everybody told us that, look, online education should be free or cheap. We said,
Mhm.
no, we'll price our program at a tickets as a 50,000 and 2 lakh rupees. Those were our first two price point, which is very
Okay.
expensive. Everybody said that online program should be short duration, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. We said it's a 6 month to a 1 year long program.
Okay.
Uh, People said that, look, if you're doing that price point product, then you do need to have some bit of offline component. We said, no, we'll have only online component in the journey. So to the question that someone asked, that these were the thoughts that we had to take in able to sort of launch Upgrad in the first part of our journey. And I guess when we are looking at these problem statements, we realize that, look, the market is not there, and I had zero sort of historical data to prove that this will work. And therefore, at that point of time, I don't think I'm answering a very clear answer for you, Suman, but at that point of time, you had to go with your gut that this is what you believe in, and this is what you need to make it work. Not that it has worked earlier, not that it has some precedence, not that there is historical data to back you up, but you believe that this is how things will happen. And that's what, when I said earlier, that you need to have one insight that many people will not believe you in. But you believe in that insight so much that you will back yourself completely to the hill. So I guess, Suman, that some of these challenges were that you tend to look at the market very closely and try to replicate what the market is saying,
Mhm.
without going into your own insight as to what you are bringing to the table to solve that problem. And that was the approach that we did to solve for some of the early challenges as to how we want to position, where we want to launch, and what kind of product will take and will take it to the market at the early stage of our journey.
Let me add to Suman's question, Mayank. As we spoke a little while ago, EdTech is currently not in favor for obvious reasons. And second, we have what's called the funding winter. These are two very present challenges in your business. How are you dealing with these two challenges? EdTech
Yeah.
getting a bad rap and funding winter.
I think, see, at the end of the day, you need to believe that you are in this business, and is this business really adding value to the end consumer or the end learner? And I truly believe that in education and edtech, there is a significant difference that various companies and various models are making to the life of the end learner or the end consumer. Yes, because of COVID, there was an irrational exuberance.
Correct.
And with coming down, that irrational exuberance has now normalized. But people and founders who are grounded, who knew what was irrational and where the bubble was, and they knew where they should be holding the ground in, are really doing well even today. And they are really seeing the growth even in today's sort of context. So perhaps because of one or two instances, I don't see EdTech as a macro event changing. Education is here to stay. Education using technology is the only way that this country can train and skill and teach millions and millions of learners out there. So from an edtech perspective, I never had an issue. Yes, there could be a press release or one or two sort of company that may say that the sector has got certain issues, but I believe in the fundamental macro. I believe that the education and technology marriage is here to stay, and I believe that there's enough number of people who will get impacted because it's true impact. It's not just some fake impact that's happening out there.
Mm-hmm.
The second point on funding winter. Look, if you have seen the ecosystem long enough, you know that it comes and it goes. When there's a winter, you finish it off and you land up in spring, and then you get summer.
Like
And then,
regular winter, like we go through regular winters every year and we survive them somehow.
so the winters are here. These are temporary things. As a founder, you are here building the business for the next 30 years or 40 years or 50 years. So you will have maybe 30, 40, if not, or at least 5, 6, if not 30, 40 winters in your own sort of entrepreneurial journey. So I think these things are part and parcel of what's happening. I guess the good part of irrational exuberance going away, and then funding winter is that a lot of founders are very much focused on absolute sustainable growth, and they're cost with the right lens, looking at what is growth at any cost versus growth at the right cost. looking at sustainability with a tighter lens and a very sort of stronger lens. So even at Upgrad, we have been sort of while we were not funded by anybody for the first 5 years of our journey. Therefore, frugality is something that we definitely capture. It is still very important for us to always keep on going back to the fundamentals that look, what cost should we have, what cost should we not have, what growth should we have, and what growth should we not have. And that's the constant conversation that we are having at Upgrad to ensure that we are building a company that is there to sustain and scale up in the long run and not just depend upon external investment to sort of drive scaling up. There's a very interesting, amongst multiple investors that you see, right, Suresh, out there in the market, people ask me, what kind of investor do you like the most? I say the best investor that can come to you are your customers. Because they're trusting you with their money on the product that you're buying. So I think that's what everybody should focus on and get the best investor on your sort of system, because they will fund your journey in the long run.
And that's sustainable because you can keep getting new customers and you can deepen existing customer relationships. Okay, next question. I think NC Gosavi is asking you for trade secrets, Mayank. Gosavi asks, what are the best marketing tactics to acquire customers in EdTech on a low budget?
So, as I said, sorry, I did not get her name, Suresh.
Gosavi, Gosavi.
So Gosavi, just to your specific question, I think one of the one thing that I have seen between a good and a great edtech or education company versus not so good is what proportion of the revenue comes from referrals and repeats. So for me, the best cost-effective way of acquiring a customer is going back to your own customers and asking them to refer more customers to you. And therefore, specifically in education and high ticket size product, because referrals matter. If you go to cars or homes and purchases which are high ticket size and high intent purchases, referrals matter a lot. So my first and foremost answer for you is go back to your own customers and ask for more referral leads and referral sort of names and try to convince them via that. The second, I believe in education, the beauty of education sector is that content plays a very important role in acquisition, because people are, education at the end of the day is one form of content dissemination. And therefore, if you find the right platforms and the right content for that particular platform, you can build a large cohort and a large sort of pull-based approach where people can come because your content is so good and you have enough platforms, whether it is Spotify, YouTube, so on and so forth, that you can host good content. People will come and sort of consume that. And the third thing that I really love in this entire thing about low-cost approach of acquisition is building communities. And if you can provide some value prop to the communities will stay with you. And then you have to work really hard on monetizing the community with sort of various approaches. So I think between community, content, and customers, there's enough that you can sort of figure out without spending a single dollar on marketing.
So you had 3 T's, now you have 3 C's, community, content, and customers. Yep. All right, next question comes from Solvin. Solvin says, I'm an entrepreneur and I have a SaaS product idea. Right? I imagine Solvin wants to continue working in a full-time job as an entrepreneur while building his or her SaaS product idea. What 1 or 2 points to be kept in mind while building this business?
See, I guess I don't know about the product that really well, but SaaS, I really love SaaS as an ecosystem because of the fact that once you build a product out, the uptake and the consumption sort of keeps on happening on an ongoing basis. So a few things I learned when, as an investor, looking at SaaS businesses in my previous role and previous avatar, is that 3 things matter in SaaS. The first thing that matters is at what cost are you acquiring the customer? And that's very critical for you to understand that the cost of acquisition of the customer should not sort of end up getting to a very different level. B is what's the churn that you have in your customer? Once a customer comes in, how many of them renew? And a great SaaS business operates at maybe 100% plus renewal rates in terms of revenue order. And therefore, more customers are coming in, buying it back, which means that your all growth is focused on getting new customer in. And because of this CAC and churn rate, you do need to understand what's your lifetime value. And if your lifetime value, because of the churn and because of how long the customer is paying you, is maybe 3-4 times more than the customer acquisition cost, those are healthy signs of building a good SaaS business. So focus on the right acquisition model, focus on the right retention model, and not churning a lot of customer. And it will give you a very healthy LTV to CAC, which will allow you to build a strong SaaS business for yourself.
Okay, Mike, next question from Sai Kiran. And I think this is bang in your wheelhouse. You need to work with a lot of partnerships and collaborations with universities and I imagine education providers. Sai Kiran asks, what key principles should entrepreneurs keep in mind while negotiating partnerships or collaborations?
So I think this was my, I just felt, this was my take that I think this one thing we got really right, Suresh. And I think our fundamental thought process in this entire thing was that whenever you are talking to a partner for going out together or for launching something together or working with someone together, you just need to go in with a very clear thought process that there has to be a massive amount of trust amongst you guys. You have to be extremely trustworthy with each other. And that trust only comes when you believe that multiple outcomes are possible when it's a win-win situation. Many a times when you're working with a partner or a collaborator, you always believe there's a win-lose. But if you go in with the mindset that, look, both of us will benefit. And if I'm getting something, you are also getting something. And you are very open about what you are getting at the end of the day. And the other person is very open about what they are getting at the end of the day. And if you understand these two together, you'll be able to build a very strong collaboration or partnership, Sai, because the moment you go with a win-lose approach, if I take something, you will lose something, chances of having a long-term partnership is very limited. Some of our university partners are 8 years old, as old as Upgrad is. And that's only because we have been extremely transparent. We have been extremely open about what we do with them. But whenever we sit down, we believe that we are doing good for each other rather than good for me versus good for them in our sort of growth trajectory.
Okay. Next question is dead simple. Vikas Chawla asks, how do you retain your team, especially the highest performing members, I imagine?
Yeah, because I think if you had an answer to this, please let me know. I think I would love to sort of learn this from you. So look, I think talent is one of the most important part when you are sort of starting your venture, even at any different stages of your own journey. I think holding on to talent, I don't think it's a science. It's a lot more art than science. It requires you to constantly be in touch with that person and have an ongoing conversation on an ongoing basis. You do need to understand their growth aspirations and how your organization or the system will provide them with their growth aspirations. Because the high performing guys will always look for the right growth approach, whether it is in terms of more opportunities, more roles, more responsibilities. As long as the two of you are very clear on their own growth trajectory, chances are that that individual will stay with you for a very long period of time. Never ever take anybody for granted, because sometimes there's a chance that, look, this guy has been with me for the last 4 years, 5 years, and 6 years. It's okay. I mean, I don't need to talk to that person about their salary. Are you underpaid? Are you overpaid or not? But constantly evaluate what is the right compensation and what is the right sort of salary and what is the right sort of commercial arrangement that you need to have with an individual. Because sometimes you would notice that people who have been there in your system for a very long time, their average salary will be lower than people that you have hired recently, because they have been through, therefore they haven't had the hike that they would have otherwise expected. So you do need to constantly revise and go back on the compensation, etc., to sort of relook at it. But between these three, four things, I'm sure that people will stay longer. The most critical thing amongst all of this is the belief in the long-term vision that the individual should have in what you're building. I think that's one thing as a founder. Your job is to constantly articulate and message and re-emphasize that this is where we are headed towards. And therefore, your role is adding me in my journey to reaching to my vision of being whatever that you want to be in that organization overall.
Okay. Quick note to all our viewers, we have 10 minutes more. Mayank will be with us till 4 p.m. today. So if you have any questions, now is your last chance to send us your questions. Next question, Mayank, comes from Sandeep Kumar. Sandeep asks, what criteria do you use to evaluate the potential risks and rewards of a business decision? Do you have a simple matrix that you use for risk and reward decision making?
Not much. I think for me, Sandeep, the main thing is from a risk reward perspective, I just sort of, I only look at, see, many a times you evaluate and you think and you overthink what are the risks and what are the reward. I just go in with only one thing. What is my worst case scenario? And as long as my worst case scenario is sort of palatable to me, I move ahead, because look, at the end of the day, you will make more mistakes than you will have more failures than successes. And therefore, in the context of that, just go in with the thought process, look, what's the worst that can happen? Will you shut down my company? Don't take that risk. But take risk and sort of put yourself in situations where you know that what's the worst case scenario. And if the worst case scenario is palatable, go in with the approach. Because you know that many a times we ask the question, what if it fails? Sometimes you do need to ask the question, what if it succeeds? When you're asking the question, what if it succeeds? The only thing you need to know is that the cost at the worst case is going to be bearable for you to go ahead and sort of launch the new product or launch the new business or take the right business decision.
All right. Next question comes from Adya Menon. And Adya says, Upgrad has expanded internationally recently. Could you elaborate on the challenges and opportunities when you take your business beyond Indian borders?
So look, I think in general, I personally believe that India is a very, very large market. And therefore, there is enough scope to build something big in India. The only reason why one should look at internationally and expanding into international segment is if you can leverage what you're building in India for global markets. So a great SaaS product will work well, a great pharma company selling in the global market will work well. But you need to be very clear that it should not lead to duplicating what you have done in India in different markets. So I think one of guiding principles had been that what can we take as a base that is already built in and build on top of that as you go and expand in international markets. That's number one that Adya will look at when we are looking at expanding internationally. The big challenge that comes in the process is that whatever that we have built is very strong in India, and therefore the brand reciprocate and resonates with the Indian audience. But the same does not happen when we go internationally. So the challenge for us is, while we can take the learning capabilities and the learning product and take it internationally, we cannot necessarily take the marketing work that we have done or the brand that we have built internationally. So the challenge for us is to build the right sort of credibility out there. And every market has got a little different nuance of building that credibility. And that's what we work towards in solving as we are looking at expanding in international markets. So therefore, sometimes, Adya, for us, organic expansion would make sense because we can take the capabilities and we know how to build credibility out there. But many a times, inorganic opportunities or M&A could make more sense to us because we can take the advantage of the India presence in terms of either cost arbitrage or execution arbitrage, but leverage the distribution capabilities that the acquired entity brings to the table. So that's how we look at international expansion, with capability being in India and looking at expansions and distribution across the world.
Okay, Radhesham Dikshit asks an excellent question in my view. Radhesham says there seems to be a fine balance between being persistent and pushing a product idea versus deciding when the right time is to quit.
Yep.
When do I know when I should quit the business?
Look, I think nobody will come and tell you when to quit the business. I guess, I mean, it's a lot more gut feel, but I'll just give you 2 points that by being persistent, I do not mean be emotional. I just mean that you should be passionate about that particular product and that particular idea. And when you are passionate, there is a fair amount of rationality built in. The moment you get emotional about the product, yaar, ye to maine banaya hai, therefore,
Correct.
in the light of the day, a lot of decisions that you end up taking is not very sort of correct and may not be right for the business. And therefore, sometimes you do need to remove yourself from that situation and look at from a different angle, whether the decision that I'm taking, is it rational or is it extremely emotional when I'm sort of making and taking that call. So I think that's a question that I always ask myself. When would you realize that business is not making sense and you are being more emotional than being more sort of passionate about it? When all the numbers that you bring to the table tells you exactly the same thing that you don't want to listen to. So when you start seeing that from every place, from every cut, your P&L does not support it, your contribution margin does not support it, your customer feedback is not great, your repeat customers are not coming, your referrals have gone for 2 dogs overall, you do understand that, look, you are perhaps being blinded by the emotional attachment to the product and the business. And sometimes removing yourself from that situation and taking a more rational and dispassionate call, if I could say, always helps as an entrepreneur, as a founder.
I like that rule of thumb. When you see data that you don't like persistently, you don't like it, maybe it's time to remove yourself from the decision and you're getting to. Okay, final question for you. We have 5 minutes left. Dr. Saroj Upadhyay says, and I know this question should be addressed to the finance minister of the country, but she's addressed it to you anyway. So Mayank, Dr. Saroj asks, what should be the role of entrepreneurship in helping the country attain 8% economic growth, 8 to 10% maybe economic growth? What can entrepreneurs do?
No, look, I think my take, and I was just talking, we launched, Suresh, one of our first program was on entrepreneurship. And we then over a period of time created a pro bono program and gave it to, at that point of time, the Minister of Commerce, Madam Nirmala Sitharaman, who is now the Minister of Finance. So she inaugurated our Startup India Learning Program. And in that conversation, we were sort of discussing, and we said that, look, India needs about 10,000 startups or 50,000 startups or 100,000 startups. And I personally believe that India needs at least about 10 million plus entrepreneurs coming out. And I say this is that for India to progress from where it is to where it should be, we need new and innovative ideas. And those innovative ideas will have to come from entrepreneurs in India, because we understand and appreciate the challenges and the nuances of this country. We do need many more jobs to be created. We don't need hundreds and thousands of jobs. We have about 8 to 10 million people coming out of college every year. We need to generate and create jobs, because as the work lifespan increases, people will be looking for more and more jobs. And in that context, again, entrepreneurs play a very, very important role, because even in the small manner, even with one startup, if you have 15 people employed, you're at least creating 15, 20 employment opportunities for various individuals. So I think the fact that entrepreneurs have to be at a level where a lot of local problems can be solved by the entrepreneurial ecosystem out there. But at the same time, while you're solving the problem, a lot many more jobs gets created. And I think that's a win-win that the country can look for, because they can create economic value, but at the same time support large-scale employment. And that can only happen if you do not have 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 startups, but 1 million plus and 10 million plus entrepreneurs coming into the Indian ecosystem.
Okay, Dr. Saroj, I hope that answers your question. We need more than 10 million entrepreneurs entering the Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem. All right, that brings us to the end of the show. We have just under a minute to go. Mayank Kumar of Upgrad, thank you very much for being our guest on Ask the Expert. Members of the audience, thank you for your insightful questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Suresh. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.